Sup, guys? So, you know how I said I wanted to talk more about Monster Hunter World? Well, Rila's not around and I got the show to myself, so why not take advantage of the chance while I have it? Hope you guys are ready to tune in, cause I'm Riley and this is Monster Hunter World. Alright, so Monster Hunter World is the latest addition to the Monster Hunter series, and I think it might just be the best one yet. For those unfamiliar with the franchise, well, hunt monsters. Pretty self-explanatory, really. But every single fight is a boss battle. But it's not like in a lot of other games where you just mindlessly hack away at a big blob of HP. You have to really think about the timing on your strikes and dodges and the monster's patterns, because this game will punish you for mistakes. That mechanical complexity could turn off a lot of new players for sure, but this game took plenty of steps towards being more beginner-friendly. So let's talk about graphics. Honestly, we know this about me by now, but I've never been all that concerned about graphics. Still, it's something worth pointing out. I started with the series with Monster Hunter Tri back on the Wii, then I jumped on to 4 Ultimate and Generations on the 3DS. The graphical jump to the PS4 was huge! This game is gorgeous, and the PS4 enhances every little detail of the new continuous single map locales. Oh, and don't worry, I'll talk about that later. But of course, it'd kinda defeat the point if I didn't mention the monsters themselves. I mean, look at the Teostra between this game and Generations. The difference is just, seriously dude, wow! As for other stuff, I've always loved a game that lets me create my own character. And the more detailed, the better, really. Thankfully, the game has a ton of options for stuff like hair and facial customization, and the characters actually have expressions. Granted, sometimes downright terrible expressions, but at least they can emote now. Could be worse. Could be like the Uncanny Valley faces from the launch of Mass Effect Andromeda. And thank God, because all those awkward cutscenes from previous games with a ton of gestures and no expressions were just weird. So, voice acting was introduced for the first time, and to great effect. It makes the game feel so much more immersive having characters actually talking to you, and it was a pretty slick way of sneaking in some not-so-intrusive tutorials that really flowed well with the game. The characters would remind you about stuff you learned every now and again, but eventually just stop naturally, as if they realized that you mastered the lesson. It was a pretty awesome touch. Aside from that, the voice actors did a great job bringing their characters to life. Actually, I recognized a few of them immediately. But speaking of characters though, the story's fine, but there's nothing really groundbreaking about it or the characters in it. And don't get me wrong, the characters are plenty likable, but they're just here to ground you into the setting of the Hunter's Hub, throw tutorials your way, and spout exposition about the plot. And the plot's basically the usual shtick. Elder dragons are screwing things up, and it's on you to figure out what's going on by hunting or capturing them. Now, I don't normally do this on a first playthrough, but I kind of found myself skipping over dialogue, and I kept catching my eyes glazing over during cutscenes. The first half hour was just mired with the things. It was such a slog. But the game gets wicked fun once you finally get past all that, and really that's what Monster Hunter's all about. It's not supposed to be a Last of Us or Mass Effect. It's a gameplay game first, story's secondary for it. Alright, so what's new with the gameplay? It may have taken me a while to get used to the major changes they made with this game, but I have to say that I absolutely love them now. The biggest thing is the elimination of the multi-segmented maps that you had to load between in previous games. Now, it's just one expansive, continuous map, and I can't get enough of it. This caused them to introduce a new core mechanic, the Scout Flies, and God, they're useful. At first, I had a lot of trouble finding the monster, following it between areas, and even just keeping track of where I was. But with the Scout Flies on hand, you can investigate monster tracks throughout the map to add to your investigation meter of that particular monster. Not only will it eventually mark it on your map and lead you to it, but it'll also add to an overall meter for this monster even after the quest ends, to eventually make it way easier to find it from the very beginning of later quests, as well as give you more information about its status. You can see when it's moving to a particular location, when it's feeding, and even when it's dying and in a capturable state. Capturing used to be a guessing game, especially amongst more inexperienced hunters, if one didn't have the monster marked and didn't have the very specific skill that showed whether it was capturable or not, which often ended in failure of capture quests via accidental slaying of the monster. God, but no more with Scout Flies. I just gotta love that GPS function that they have. If you open up your map, you can select a monster or gathering point or whatever, and they'll take you straight to it, which is a huge help, especially for getting monsters that are at different elevations on the map. or if you just suck at directions and never know where you're going, like Rila. No, seriously, she's been lost in Breath of the Wild for months now. It's no wonder Mom and Dad don't trust her with a car. Anyway, the scout flies also alert you to gathering points and tracks nearby, which can be overwhelming at first when you don't know what's important or not, but over time it'll be very helpful in locating things that may have been easy to miss otherwise. Actually, on that note, gathering points have made a ton of quality of life changes that are fantastic. Gathering is instantaneous now, and items like ores and monster carves will go in a separate bag from your usables. Inventory management is almost always one of the most tedious parts of these big adventure games. Hell, even Horizon Zero Dawn suffered from it a little, and the previous Monster Hunter games were no exception. A lot of the time, it'd bring the gameplay to a screeching halt, forcing you to juggle menus to pick up that drop you just carved, but oh, there's a monster flying at you, then you just panic, and yeah, it was pretty obnoxious before. You also get infinite pickaxes, bug nets, whetstones, fishing nets, you get the idea. All the tools are readily available and you don't have to worry about them taking up room or breaking on you at crucial moments. I can tell you stories, man, and none of them are pretty. The items are easier to use too. There are new customizable radial menus to go with the usual scrolling one, the ability to keep moving while using a consumable interruption, auto-crafting, just a bunch of changes that make item management way less of a chore that takes you out of the hunt. And that said, there is one major gripe about the gameplay. The UI is downright tiny! I can't see anything, and I have to sit right next to the screen to read any of the text or icons. I hope they fix it in a patch soon, because my eyes scream at me whenever I decide to turn the game on, and that's not okay! Now, I don't have a whole lot to say about the refinements made to the weapon combos overall, because I'm, well, a bit of a switch axe purist, but I can at least contribute my thoughts on that weapon type specifically. I think it's a lot easier to smoothly transition between both axe and sword mode with the switch axe now, and I think it's awesome how they added this new move called zero-sum discharge, which lodges you and your weapon onto a part of the monster and unleashes your elemental discharge straight into it. It's so cool and satisfying. But be warned, guys, there's a strategy to it. If you don't finish your discharge by the time the monster starts attacking or moving, you'll get hurt in the process. So one needs to learn the art of timing when to let go as well. I've heard they've made other such improvements to other weapon types and seem to have made the bowguns easier and cooler to use, but that's all hearsay on my end. All I know is switch axe. They've also expanded the weapon trees so you can actually see which path you might want to take without having to look everything up online. It won't reveal everything until you find pieces of monsters that it needs, but it really helps a lot. On top of that, they've also added damage numbers, so you actually know if the monster is weak to the element you're using and if you're hitting a vulnerable spot, which just makes the whole experience so much more gratifying. They've made a ton of improvements in the online room and quest systems, but there were also some new drawbacks introduced. Instead of being dropped in a room with just 4 people, you're now match-made into a session of up to 16 people. In previous games, there was a huge issue of being restricted by needing to reach a consensus with the room on what monster to fight, and quests would only count as complete for the person who posted it. So sometimes it would take forever to get to your turn of posting your key quest or whatever monster you felt like fighting. And if you were tired of the monster they were fighting in that room, you'd have to leave and find another room, which just really broke the flow of gameplay and involved way more loading screens. In Monster Hunter World, SOS flares are an absolute godsend. When you start a quest, you can fire an SOS flare to have your room be seen by others who can search for rooms of their desired monster, and they can drop right in the middle of your quest with adjusted difficulty. And so far, people have been consistently showing up within minutes no matter what monster I was fighting. It works both ways too. You can search to see if anyone has sent up a flare for a monster you're interested in, and you'll receive rewards for the quest as long as you've entered it early enough. And the quest will count for everyone, even if it's a story quest. You no longer have to be restricted by the players in the same session as you, and you're all free to do as you please by dropping into hunts across the entire game or playing with each other when your desired monsters do happen to coincide. However, there is quite a huge flaw that has been brought up by many others already, which I hope Capcom will address in the future. Quests have been segmented into 4 categories in this game: assigned, optional, investigations, and events. I'm mainly talking about assigned quests here. See, since they're linked to the story, they'll always be accompanied by cutscenes, which is all well and good, but you can't enter these quests with your friends from the get-go because of this. Essentially, here are the steps you'd have to take if you wanted to progress through story quests at the same time as a friend. Both accept the assigned quest and go into their respective hunts. Once both finish watching all cutscenes, one person will have to quit their hunt, wait through a loading screen, join the other person's hunt, wait through another loading screen, and then you can play the quest together. And those loading screens aren't that short either. They're not egregiously long, but long enough. You and your friend could both trade off being the person that has to do this, so it doesn't just become super tedious for one person, but it's just a frustrating and nonsensical system. Now look, I know, but Riley, why not just do any of the other quest categories together instead? There should be plenty of other quests to play with friends, right? Well, yes and no. Optionals are mostly smaller side quests that often come from NPCs and will unlock helpful but unimportant hub functions. There are only ever a few event quests at a time for special event armor, so you'll get through them quick. Lastly, investigations are quests for specific monsters that will show up and can be registered after you've already tracked and hunted them enough. In other words, you have to encounter them in the first place. The assigned quests not only advance the story, but they also unlock more locales, monsters, weapon upgrades, and other important options. Why wouldn't you want to do those first? I really feel this is a huge oversight, but it was unfortunately a necessary process for me because I wanted to advance together with my friends. Ah well, nothing's perfect. Holy crap! The armor system got one hell of an overhaul, and that changed a lot about the pace of the gameplay itself. Before, you'd feel obligated to get full armor sets of a single monster in order for their skills to activate at all. But now, every single armor piece from any set automatically activates a skill, so it's so much easier and encouraged to mix up pieces from any monster you'd like, and the possibilities are just endless. But if you're like me and like to make full sets to look consistent anyway, there are also set bonuses, not only for having the full set, but even just for 2 or 3 pieces of it. What this means for gameplay is that you're not stuck fighting the exact same monsters for a crap ton of hunts in a row. Well, unless you want that rare drop from them, that is. And that seriously encourages you to actually fight a wider range of the monsters they have to offer. Another thing I noticed that I thought was cool was that they got rid of negative effects on armor, like making your stamina go down faster. Less to worry about, so that's a plus for me. Okay, you remember Pelicos? Well, our cute little cat companions have returned in this game with improvements that make them incredibly useful AI. Aside from being really helpful in drawing aggro away if you're playing solo, their new gadgets are way useful. Before, they could heal you a tiny bit with these dinky horns at long intervals between uses. But the default Vigor Wasps they come equipped with now in this game heal you a ton and can be summoned pretty frequently. Their other gadgets are really cool too, so you should definitely look out for the quest to get them. Okay, last thing. So you guys know me by now. Of course I've beaten the game already, but there's still so much the game has to offer. Previous games had a G rank, which was an extra tier of difficult quests and harder monsters. Though this game lacks a G rank, it does still have its own more difficult versions of monsters that you'll discover later on. And it still takes a long time to collect monster parts for all the armor and weapons you may want. New quests are still unlocking for me at higher hunter ranks, and they've already announced DLC on the way of a returning monster, the Devil Joe. Can't wait to see what they do to keep this game going strong with DLC. As long as it's good anyway. Yeah, the game has its small problems, but I've been having a blast with it overall, and I totally recommend anyone to pick it up. And with more content updates on the way, this game's probably gonna be holding me prisoner for a long time to come. Between it, ARMS, and Overwatch, it's a wonder I ever leave the house, honestly. Anyway, that's my review, guys! Have you played the game already? What'd you think about it? Drop a comment below and let us know. Thanks for watching! If you liked what you saw, give that like button a zap. Share with your friends, subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified whenever we upload a new video, and be sure to support us by checking out that Patreon link in the description. Also, check out the site for more awesome content like this from the guys. This has been a Bulletoon review. I'm Riley, and as always, stay tuned!